Good morning and welcome to Health and Safety Training for the Alexandria School District. My name is Rick Bernaldson and I am the Health and Safety Manager with Lakes Country Service Cooperative. My team consists of three facilitators, Jeff Price, Wayne Stevens, and Jason Parola. And our Director of Administrative Services is Melissa Matson, and Lynette Hansen is my Health and Safety Assistant. So we always start out with asking a question when it comes to health and safety training with regard to why. Why should we do safety training every year? When we take a look at the top 10 causes of death, we see that the first four really are kind of stage of life situations. Things that may be related more to your age and stage of life, your personal uh, physical health. Whereas that fifth reason for causes of death is accidents. So accidents are the fifth leading cause of death. And because of that, we want to make sure that we want to avoid these accidents in the workplace. However, if you happen to be in this age group of people aged 1 to 41, you need to keep in mind that accidents are the leading cause of death for people in that age group. When it comes to health and safety, a lot of people will say things like, I've done it this way hundreds of times and nothing has ever happened. And most people's attitudes towards safety is that accidents happen to other people. However, studies have shown that it takes between 300 to 1,000 unsafe acts before an injury is sustained. So if you figure it's about 700 unsafe acts on average before you incur an injury or sustain an accident, it does feel like accidents happen to other people. But, but when it comes from your employer's perspective, things don't work out that way. Statistics catch up. So the Alexandria School District has well over 700 employees. So if each employee does one unsafe act a week, you can guarantee that there's probably going to be an injury occurring about every week. What are the causes of these accidents? When we take a look at accident investigation, typically we're finding 20% of the causes of accidents are due to unsafe conditions. So something in the workplace is causing the individual to have an accident, or is a contributing factor for an employee to get injured on the job. However, more often than not, the causes of accidents are due to unsafe acts, or the way we're handling ourselves in the workplace versus the workplace conditions. So again, we ask, why should we do safety training every year? Well, there's a couple different reasons why. It makes sense and sense. It protects employees' safety and health, avoids expenses of injuries and illnesses. OSHA data shows occupational health and safety training yields savings as much as 4 to 6 times their cost. And it keeps you in compliance. You being your employer, keeps your employer in compliance with the regulatory authorities. The first workplace standard that we look at is AWARE. The AWARE program, or the AWARE standard, is a Minnesota OSHA program. It's an acronym that stands for a Workplace Accident Injury Reduction Program. It's a policy that states employees at every level have a responsibility for maintaining safety and occupational health, and are expected to cooperate fully with the health and safety policies. Again, it is a Minnesota OSHA standard. And one of the things I like to point out is Minnesota has its own OSHA. There's federal OSHA and there's Minnesota OSHA. One of 23 states that has a state standard for OSHA. And sometimes the states have specific standards that are more restrictive than federal standards. And Minnesota OSHA is one of those states that has some more restrictive policies. The AWARE program establishes the need for a safety committee. Your school district does have a safety committee, and you should know a member of that safety committee if you ever want to bring a safety issue or concern forward. The AWARE program asks that you report accidents and near misses so that they can be investigated. Near misses are those instances where you almost got in an accident. Maybe you slipped, but you didn't fall. And you might want to report that just to make sure that the situation gets taken care of, and that the next person doesn't get injured who's runs into the same obstacle. And the AWARE program assigns responsibility for safety throughout the organization. The AWARE program also talks about the fact that you need health and safety written plans. Your written plans are kept at the hub in Wade Nibby's office. So bottom line, the AWARE program states who responsibility for safety falls on, and it falls on everyone. Everyone has a responsibility to work in a safe manner and understand the safety policies of their department. We're going to move on to fire safety for the classrooms. A lot of these points are coming from straight from the fire marshal's published documentation for educational occupancy buildings. So for most classrooms with less than 50 occupants, we need to have aisle access ways between desks or tables that are at least 24 inches wide. Aisles leading to classroom exit doorways should be at least 36 inches wide. And aisles and aisle access ways will have no obstructions or impediments. Required exit doors must be maintained free from obstructions or impediments to full instant use. Your exit doors must be distinguishable from the adjacent construction and finishes and cannot be concealed or made unrecognizable. And exit signs must be clearly visible and cannot be obstructed or otherwise concealed. Storage of personal effects in egress corridors. So personal effects such as jackets, shoes, boots, backpacks, etc., shall not be stored in non-sprinkler protected corridors or lobbies unless enclosed within metal lockers. I'm not sure of too many areas in Alexandria school districts that are not sprinkled. Possibly some of the outlying buildings or smaller buildings, it's possible that there are some areas that are not sprinkled. If that is the case, you can't have just random storage of these types of items in your hallway. They need to be in enclosed metal lockers. Personal effects shall not be located within the required width of a corridor, pose an obstruction or impediment to egress. So loose items not secured by racks, cubbies, or similar storage systems may be considered a potential egress obstruction or impediment. So even if you are fully sprinkled or in a fully sprinkled building, you're not allowed to have these type of items migrate into the egress area of your corridor. You're going to want to make sure, especially with the winter season coming up, want to make sure that those type of items are kept in the lockers and out of the main egress of your corridors. Desk and workstations in egress corridors. So desks, tables, chairs, and similar workstations in corridors must be located in an alcove or similar area outside the minimum required egress width of the corridors. Some buildings are constructed where the classroom door is actually kind of part of a little cubby area that's indented from the main hallway, and sometimes you can fit a chair or table in that area without obstructing the doorway, and that is fine. That is okay to do that. But as soon as you start seeing items getting into the main area of the corridor, like the photo on the right, you can see a desk and chair there. That's actually getting into the corridor, and we want to avoid that. Combustible artwork, teaching materials, and decorative items. On the corridor walls, it's limited to 20% of the wall area in buildings without fire protections or fire sprinkler systems. 50% coverage is permitted in sprinkler protected buildings. Combustible artwork, teaching materials, and decorative items in your classroom walls. So inside your classroom walls, it's limited to 50% of the aggregate wall of the classroom. So if you add up maybe 4 walls in the classroom, if you add up the square footage area of those 4 walls, no more than 50% can be covered with combustible artwork, teaching materials, and decorative items. Fire code official may limit quantities or require an approved fire retardant treatment when such materials pose a fire hazard. Decorative displays, really, this is more along the lines when you're getting into the seasonal time of year where we start seeing a lot of decorative displays. We want to make sure if you're using significant quantities of highly flammable materials such as foam plastics, textiles, or dried vegetation, they're prohibited unless documented to have passed an appropriate fire propagation test or treated as a flame retardant. Items suspended from ceilings. Items suspended from ceilings such as banners, flags, sculptures, etc. must not obstruct the spray pattern of fire sprinkler heads. Typically, items located within 18 inches of sprinkler head deflectors are considered obstructions. So that's the key rule there, 18 inches. Within 18 inches of a sprinkler head. Relatively small or lightweight decorations such as paper snowflakes, mobiles, etc. should not be considered obstructions in most cases. Moving on, talk a little bit about electrical safety. Extension cords, want to make sure we have proper extension cords being used in your buildings and classrooms. The extension cord on the right really shouldn't be in your building. That's a household use extension cord. If you look at the tag that usually comes on those type of extension cords, it's going to say household use only. The school buildings are not households, and you should not be using that type of extension cord. The one on the left is a fully grounded extension cord, which would be acceptable to be used in your workplace. You never want to put extension cords to be placed under floor coverings or in any location subject to environmental or physical damage. These extension cords should not be used as a substitute for permanent wiring, but may be used temporarily with portable appliances. We always want to make sure our electrical cords are being kept in good condition and without damage. If you see these types of things like a broken ground pin or other broken casings exposing the internal wiring, you want to report those things and have them removed from your area. Power strips must be equipped with overcurrent protection. They need to be UL listed or other laboratory certified. They should be polarized and grounded. Power strips need to be plugged directly into a permanently installed electrical receptacle. You do not want to put a power tap into another power tap or extension cord. This is known as pigtailing and can create a fire hazard very quickly when you do that kind of practice. And again, none of your power strips should be overloaded. Power strips should never be used to plug appliances into. Any type of appliance should be plugged directly into an outlet. Electric space heaters. You want to make sure what your building policy or district policy is regarding space heaters in your work areas. If they have a policy that it's not allowed, then they're just not allowed. If they are allowed, you need to make sure there are particular types of space heaters that are allowed. They must be listed by a nationally recognized testing laboratory and operated in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Most heaters will require at least 3 feet of clearance from combustibles and cannot be operated in areas where flammable vapors may be present or where flammable combustible liquids are stored. Ceramic or oil-filled type heaters are recommended. Both kinds need tip-over protection. So that means if the heater gets tipped over, that it would automatically turn off. And again, like any appliance, electric space heaters must be plugged directly into a permanently installed electrical receptacle without the use of an extension cord or power strip. Understand fire evacuation procedures. Upon fire alarm system activation, follow your school's fire emergency and evacuation procedures. Ensure the classroom door is closed and latched after all occupants have left the room. After reaching your classroom's assigned assembly point, ensure all students are accounted for. First evacuation should be completed within the first 10 days of the school year. Next, we'll move on to ladder use. We say this every year, and we'll continue to say it every year. You know, we don't stand on chairs, we don't stand on tables, we don't stand on milk crates, we don't stand on kids, we don't stand on 5-gallon buckets. We want to use proper ladders to get to elevated surfaces. These are some examples of proper ladders that can be used in the workplace. We do want to make sure, though, that the ladders you're using are rated for commercial buildings and not light duty household ladders. So on the far left, that's a type 3 ladder, is going to be rated for 200 pounds and it's going to be labeled as light duty household ladder. Type 2 and type 1 ladders are allowed in the building. So if you bring in a ladder from your home to the workplace, you want to make sure that it is a type 1 or type 2 ladder. Next, we'll discuss slips, trips, and falls. Slips, trips, and falls are still the number one cause for reportable accidents throughout all industry. There's numerous causes for these slips, trips, and falls, including uneven walking surfaces, spills, loose matting, weather-related conditions like rain, snow, and/or ice, use of inappropriate footwear, walkway surfaces that are in disrepair, highly polished surfaces, floors that do not allow for adequate footwear traction, clutter, an open desk and cabinet drawers. These are all different causes of slips, trips, and falls. So we really want to talk about prevention of these slips, trips, and falls. So we want to make sure we're practicing good housekeeping. Keep your area clear of clutter and keep it in a good orderly condition. Keeping floor surfaces clean and dry, paying attention to wet floor warning signs, maintaining clear aisles and passageways. Keep cords out of the way, reporting and cleaning up spills immediately, providing adequate lighting in all areas. Pay attention for uneven floor surfaces. Wearing appropriate footwear for the conditions. Remember, winter is coming. See your path. Watch that first step. So see your path means, don't be carrying a bunch of materials, so much materials that you can't see your feet in front of you or the path in front of you. Watch that first step. That's really about, especially when getting out of a car. A lot of times that first step getting out of a car is the one that you slip and fall on. And then we want to remember to walk like a penguin in winter. We call it the Minnesota Shuffle. May not look good, but it does help keep you stable and balanced. Next, we're going to talk about a couple different standards. Employee right to know, hazard communication. I mentioned Minnesota OSHA earlier, and employee right to know is a Minnesota OSHA standard. Hazard communication is the federal standard. Both of them talk about the hazards associated with your job, and those hazards can be physical, chemical, and infectious hazards. Hazard communication from the federal level adopted GHS, or the Global Harmonized System, about a decade ago. And that system and that standard asks that you have a review of pictograms that were produced by GHS, and that you do a review of those and that you understand what each of those pictograms mean. The pictograms are just visual indicators of the potential hazards of a chemical that you may be exposed to or you're using. Starting with the top left, it looks like two test tubes pouring items or pouring liquid onto a hand or metal. Those are corrosives. If you see a corrosive, you're probably going to see an accompanied word like danger. One in the middle, top middle, is the exclamation mark. It's an acute toxicity. It's an irritant sensitizer. It's going to be a little less toxic than the middle left skull and crossbones, which is a different type of acute toxicity. That one is going to be more severe. You'll probably see warning with the exclamation mark. You may see a signal word of danger when dealing with skull and crossbones. Top right's our exploding bomb. That's a self-reactive. We shouldn't have many chemicals in the building that are self-reactives. Middle is our flame. We've seen that for years and years and years. We all know when we see that, we know that the product that we're using is highly flammable. Next to that's our gas cylinder, compressed gas cylinder. Pretty much only maybe our science rooms and our ag metal shop are using compressed gas cylinders. Bottom left is an environmental hazard. Just means if you see that symbol, it means you can't just dispose of it down a drain. Probably special considerations before disposing. The bottom middle is a health hazard, so it's the exploding lung. Could be some sort of recognized health hazard. Typically, the signal word with that is also danger. And the bottom right is an oxidizer. Again, not something that there's a lot of exposure to in your workplace, but it's just a different type of flammability that may occur with a chemical. Safety data sheets are available in each of your buildings for all the different chemicals and products being used. The safety data sheet just provides all the technical information available on a particular product that's being used. Anything and everything from the hazards to storage to personal protective equipment to first aid requirements if you do have an exposure to the product. Exceptions to safety data sheets. You do not need safety data sheets for personal use chemicals such as hand lotions, sanitizers, disinfecting wipes, personal medications when used in the manner they are intended. That manner would be for your personal use. If you are just have a small bottle of Purell at your desk and you're using it for yourself, you would not need a safety data sheet available for that. However, if you have a gallon jug of Purell that you bought from Sam's Club and you put it on the back room shelf for everyone to use, well, now that's outside of the parameter of what the manner was intended, and you'd probably need to get a safety data sheet and have that available if requested. Secondary labeling, anything can be put into another container, but how is that accomplished properly? So we always want to make sure that these secondary labels or secondary use containers have at minimum the manufacturer name, the name of the product, and then the hazard of the chemical that conveys all physical and health hazards. You also need a combination of either signal words, symbols, or pictures. So you might have something like SC Johnson, Windex, warning, skin sensitizer with the exclamation point from the GHS pictograms. Exceptions to secondary use labeling. Not all things need to be labeled. Portable immediate use containers used by the employee who transferred the chemicals do not have to be labeled. The most obvious one is like a custodial mop bucket. That mop bucket does not need to be labeled with the chemical that's being used in it. It's immediate use. It's under the control of the employee, and the employee takes care of it at the end of the day. And that mop bucket would not need to be labeled with the product that's in it. We'll move on to infectious disease and bloodborne hazards, bloodborne pathogens. Hand sanitizers. Hand sanitizers are an excellent way to protect yourself. However, you want to make sure you're using it properly. So you always want to make sure you dispense an adequate amount of hand sanitizer to fully cover your hands. Rub the hand sanitizer to cover the entire surface area of the hands, paying special attention to the areas between fingers and around nails. And then rub until dry. Do not rinse. Some other tips to prevent yourself from getting these infectious diseases would be avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. That's the great way or easy way for germs to spread. If you're sick, you want to stay home. CDC recommends that you stay home from work or school and limit contact with others to keep from infecting them. Sometimes it's tough to make that decision. We all know that substitutes are hard to come by and that we're short staffed, but it's better off to make sure you're not infecting everyone else and students if you're sick than coming in and spreading the infectious disease to everyone. Next, we'll move on to bloodborne pathogens. Bloodborne pathogens is a OSHA standard. If you are considered occupationally exposed, then you fall under the bloodborne pathogen standard. The definition of occupationally exposed is those employees who have a higher chance of coming into contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials that contain blood are considered occupationally exposed. Are you considered to be occupationally exposed to blood? Alexandria School District considers the following staff to be occupationally exposed: custodial staff, physical education staff, and lifeguards, industrial technology instructors, special education instructors, coaches of football, wrestling, hockey, soccer, basketball, baseball, and softball, science instructors, school nurse and the health service staff, office staff that perform first aid or cover the health office, playground supervisors, and bus drivers. So, what are bloodborne pathogens? Bloodborne pathogens are infectious microorganisms present in blood that can cause disease in humans. These pathogens include hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS. The hepatitis B virus is very contagious and dangerous infection. It's 100 times more contagious than HIV. It can live outside the body in dried blood up to 7 days. It's contracted from contact with blood, blood products, and other body substances. Hepatitis B can affect individuals differently. There is no cure, but there is a preventative vaccine, which is a series of 3 shots given over about a 6-month time period. If you are considered occupationally exposed by the Alexandria School District, you need to have a consent decline form on file for the hepatitis B vaccine. It's a form that basically asks if you want to get the vaccine, and there's 3 different answers. It basically says you want the vaccine, you don't want the vaccine, or you don't want the vaccine because you've already received the vaccine. Some people can be carriers of the virus and never get sick, and that is why they can infect others without even knowing it. Symptoms of hepatitis B include flu-like, fatigue, appetite loss, jaundice, liver problems, abdominal pain, and nausea. Moving on to Hep C. Again, Hep C, Hep B, very, very similar. Hep B is a viral infection of the liver spread by contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials of an infected person. It can live up to several weeks outside the body. Not typically fatal, but usually chronic. Cannot be distinguished from other forms without testing. There is no vaccine for hepatitis C. However, treatments can reduce the viral load to undetectable levels, which is considered cured or in remission. Majority of carriers, again, do not show symptoms. And the symptoms of Hep C are very similar to Hep B. Flu-like, fatigue, appetite loss, jaundice, liver problems, and dark urine. And finally, HIV is a disease of the immune system that causes the disease known as AIDS. No vaccine available. And this virus is very weak outside the body. It can live outside the body for only a short period of time. Doesn't have nearly the viral load of Hep B and Hep C, which can live outside the body for extended periods of time. Symptoms of HIV include fatigue, night sweats, weight loss, gland pain or swelling, muscle and joint pain, and fever. What is considered to be an exposure incident? How do you get exposed to a bloodborne pathogen? Well, they're all transmitted the same way, through internal exposure to contaminated blood or body fluids containing visible blood. So we need to understand the route of entry of how can this pathogen get to be an internal exposure. Well, it would include your mucous membranes, such as your eyes and your nose and your mouth. It could also include your broken skin. Recently broken skin, a pathogen could possibly enter your body. Your intact skin is a good barrier to bloodborne pathogens. If you were to get a body fluid or blood on your forearm that's perfectly intact skin, you would not get a pathogen from that. So, you want to know how to protect yourself. We always use universal precautions. So, whenever you're dealing with any kind of blood or body fluid incident, you always want to assume that it does have a pathogen in it, and you're going to use your proper personal protective equipment, which is a minimum of gloves. Use your proper disinfectants, and then dispose clean contaminated items properly. Remember, Personal protective equipment for your area and for yourself is provided by your employer. You are expected to use it. If you are provided the PPE, you are expected to use it. Length of time to perform the task is irrelevant. If it takes you 10 seconds to pour bleach into a sink that you're using that bleach for some reason, you still are expected to wear the proper PPE when you're using, in that case, it would be a corrosive. So you'd want to put on a chemical goggles and you'd want to put chemical gloves on before you perform that task. And you want to keep your PPE in good condition and store it properly. This concludes our health and safety training for the year. Want to wish you all a great year and hope that you have a lot of success. Thanks.